I've got a serious question for you. Have you enjoyed this season so far? Or have all the extra games in Champions League somehow devalued or diminished your engagement with Aston Villa Football Club? Because I love barbecued steak, but I'm not having it every day or even twice a week for that matter. And I appreciate ambition. A club like ours should have ambition, but I fear that our desire to compete across multiple competitions is going to come at a cost. Let's talk about that, and presented by 24/7 Services, let's also talk about Villa 1, West Ham 1. Welcome inside the parlor, and I hate moaning or whinging, and I don't want to sound ungrateful at all because the club I've supported for over 40 years is back in the Champions League and trying to compete there, and is, while also trying to stay within the top places in the Premier League. But I have to be honest, I'm not enjoying this season as much as last year or even the year before. I feel guilty saying that almost because I feel like everything's being watered down. And record-wise, after a midweek Champions League game this year, our record is 1 win, 3 losses, and 3 draws. So there is a trend occurring. And we have 2 days between West Ham and Celtic, and then another 2 days, and we're off to a traditionally awful fixture at Molineux. Is UEFA's biggest club cash cow better this year? I think the new league's format has been good, but it's not about being good. It's about making the federation more money, adding 2 more games across the board, and then sort of sneaking in this little extra playoff round before the round of 16. Come on, it's about making money. And the clubs stand to make money too. I mean, Aston Villa could earn significant revenue if they get into the later stages of the knockout rounds, but we are a threadbare squad already running on fumes, and the PSR noose around our neck makes it difficult to upgrade, improve our squad. And then, of course, there's a limit to even how many players you can register for the Champions League games. Even as a highly strategic, previously debt-free, and I say previously debt-free because Villa has taken on debt to circumvent PSR. How stupid is that? Our owners are willing and able to spend more money. Meanwhile, a horribly run, non-strategic club like Manchester United can lose £300 million over 3 years. The PSR limit is £105 million. So are they going to suffer the same points deduction fate as Leicester, Everton, and Nottingham Forest? Please explain this to me like I'm a 5-year-old. And then there's Manchester City facing 115 charges, yet they have been able to go and spend €152 million on 3 players this January transfer window. And you wonder why some people become disenchanted. And because of this PSR racket, we're being forced to shop in Europe's bargain bins and clearance aisles, and we're still going to be limping along, running on fumes, playing every couple of days, and we're one bad tackle away from Sil Swinkles, starting at center back. And worst of all, tired footballers give us games like the one we saw on Sunday. Believe it or not, fresh footballers contribute to fresh football. Tired ones playing out of position lead us to what we saw just now and at the European Championships this summer, where it was probably the worst standard of football I've seen in a long time for a major championship, which, by the way, UEFA invited more countries to make more money. I didn't want to start this show on a downer, moany note, but I see what's going on here. The cards are stacked against the Aston Villas of the Premier League. And when guys like me get jaded about the bigger picture, that's not a good thing. I know I'm not alone. I know others who feel the same, including our senior correspondents who are having to pick and choose which games to go and see at Villa Park, like Samir, who made the long, rain-soaked drive from Leeds. What a trooper. What a dedicated fan. we probably shouldn't be surprised that the team not playing midweek got stronger as the game wore on and actually ended up with superior numbers in most categories, including XG and big chances created. My special stat was accurate crosses, which has completely failed us of late, and it was one of those long diagonal crosses that turned out to be the difference between 3 points and 1. At stake on Sunday was a chance to do our first league double over West Ham in 14 years on the occasion of Ollie Watkins' 200th appearance with the club. And the only change from the Monaco game from a lineup standpoint was Jacob Ramsey starting, and didn't he get off to a great start? And what a goal. How good was it for him to finally score his first Premier League goal? He buried that absolutely beautifully. And at that point and in that phase, we were so on top, it really did feel like it was going to end up being 3 or 4. Morgan Rogers had the one that he tapped in before Watkins was called offside, but you feel like any goal during that phase when we were on top probably would have been enough. Max Kilman was Graham Potter's only fit center back, and so the way home seemed to be down the sides or in behind Soufal and Cresswell. Problem is, we didn't have Leon Bailey from last year. This is a guy who's very popular amongst his teammates, and he is in some kind of a funk. And I realize it doesn't help having all these injuries that were bothering him this year. And yes, teams scout the opposition more diligently so they know his tendencies, but he's still looking for his first goal of the season, and he looks nowhere near scoring it, which kind of leads to big issue number 3. No killer instinct. And how many times have I said that this season? Where have the 2-0 or 3-0 or 3-1 goals gone? Like, for example, last year we won this fixture in a stroll, 4-1 comfortably. And we've had a very good run against Graham Potter's teams too, Brighton, Chelsea, and then, of course, his debut with West Ham United. But you know, the goals last year that were provided by Diaby, Luiz, and Bailey have just not been replaced this year. Well, Bailey has none yet. In all competitions, those 3 had 34. This year, we've had some goals from Onana and Rogers and Duran and even Ross Barkley, 28 of them. But that's 6 short. That doesn't sound like a lot in all competitions, but it is. Those extra 6 goals could have meant an awful lot for us. I've lost count of how many times this season that either Morgan Rogers or Leon Bailey just seem to get caught in 2 minds about the final action. I mean, Bailey is so predictable. He always wants to shift over to his left-hand side, his preferred foot. And Rogers just tries to take on too many players. I mean, it probably takes him 5 dribbles to create one decent opening or chance because teams know he's going to drive with it. So they crowd him out and he loses the ball. Where we miss Moussa Diaby is his ability to link up and combine in tight spaces. And he also moved so well in those pockets that were created by Ollie Watkins occupying center backs. We need to come to terms with the fact that part of this lack of fluidity or fluency even is mental and physical fatigue. And because Unai Emery loves to ride the guys that he trusts and push them to the very limit, well, guess what that does to the rest of the squad? It makes it harder for them to come in, be effective, be fresh, be comfortable and confident. And a great example is Ian Maatsen, who had a really tough outing on Sunday. I mean, I know Luca Deans played well, but here's a guy who we paid $36 million for. Don't you think he should be playing more? He had a terrible time trying to figure out his role in a reshuffled back line. We simply cannot expect Daniel Malen to provide instant success or results, but we will expect it, of course, won't we? And he did have a pretty decent look at goal on Sunday. And then, despite the fact that his contract has been extended by a year, I just don't see Emi Buendia regaining his Premier League tempo and sharpness in this team right now, the way he had when Unai Emery first arrived and, of course, in the preseason before the injury. I think he has to go on loan to regain confidence, and that contract extension gives the club some flexibility, so at least we know we're not going to lose him for free in the summer, and maybe he can regain some of that sharpness. Bayer Leverkusen among teams interested in taking him on loan. I've always been fascinated by the building trades, and I love a good before and after home renovation show like this old house, for example. And that's why 24/7 Services was the perfect title sponsor for this show, because I understand the business a little bit. Not to mention, they're a Birmingham-founded, Villa-mad, family-run business. But, you know, me talking about 24/7 Services as the title sponsors of this show, not quite the same, because they haven't done any work in this house, even though there's a lot of work to do. So it's always great to hear from an actual, truly satisfied customer. And Alan James, who is a fellow Canadian and a dedicated viewer of this show, once did the perfect testimonial.
Hi, Pete. We've had 24/7 around to do all those jobs that have been building up around the place. And you can see here, look, got a couple of new doors down here in the back. And they've done all the paint work here and around all the windows, all the difficult paint work. And up there, they've fixed all our guttering, especially around out front where it needed, the roof needed some repointing and that sort of thing. And check out over here, that new fence. Look at that beauty. That's not going anywhere anytime soon. So they did a great job. And we live a fair distance out of Birmingham too, so we appreciated them coming. So thanks very much for the tip, and up to Villa.
We would love to have more of these kinds of client testimonials to feature on this show or on the 24/7 Services website. And if you have a project that you'd then like to talk about on this show, start here at the 24/7 Services website or find the numbers in the description of this video. Another key issue that reared its ugly head again on Sunday, and this is back-to-back games now, was how ineffective we were from dead ball situations. And I bemoaned the fact that we weren't doing any of the innovative, creative stuff at Monaco anymore, just opting to knock it into a crowded box, which requires perfect delivery. But on Sunday, we did try some short type routines that fell woefully short. I mean, in addition to a really poor free kick at the edge of the box, Luca Dean was presiding over one at the end of the first half, and that pretty much summed up our day after what was such a promising opening. There was one in that first half which went directly to Ollie Watkins, who seemed unmarked and unhindered as he steered it wide of the far post. Unfortunately, he couldn't get it on target. That was by no means an easy chance, and it wasn't considered even a big chance. But if that goes in there, we're talking about 3 points probably, and we're not talking about how John Duran would have scored in that same situation, which I'm telling you internally is starting to become a bigger problem than most people think. Big issue number 2, ridiculous refereeing. I was so hoping to not have to bring up Peter Banks' performance as part of this show, but the standard of officiating was so appallingly inconsistent, I have no choice, because it contributes to the rising temperature of that game and the uncomfortable edge that was starting to develop, because when players don't know what a foul is, guess what happens? I mean, you had an incident that occurred over here and then over here, sometimes just seconds or even minutes apart, but interpreted with different outcomes. Oh, and then you had that pathetic pantomime Paquetá going through his tricks and cons and dark arts and cheating, which then led to other players stooping to that level. But you cannot outmaster the sensei of Premier League dark arts. Of all the Banks blunders in this game, the biggest one for me was how on earth Edson Alvarez remained on the park in this game. I mean, he's the yellow card leader in the league. He's already been sent off once this season, and he took numerous fouls, some that were called, some that weren't. He should have been booked for one in the 55th minute. He's already on 3 fouls at this point and could have had more, but he doesn't get booked for this in the 55th minute. So remind me again, what is persistent infringement if that would have been his 4th foul? So he gets away with that one, but then he does get cautioned in the 67th minute. So if he had gotten the yellow card in the 55th, he would have been sent off in the 67th, or he wouldn't have been able to take the foul in the 67th minute. But instead, he remains on the field and provides the game-tying goal assist. And then later, while on a yellow card, and as Aston Villa was breaking, Alvarez intentionally fouls Boubacar Kamara and gets away with it. Morgan Rogers prevents a counterattack earlier in the game. He's booked. So 2 similar situations, punished differently. Alvarez should have been called for a foul on John McGinn at the edge of his own box before that, but it's McGinn who's called for a foul with the most minimal of contact. And this is what drives coaches, fans, but especially players crazy when they don't know what the standard is. And there was a point in this game when Peter Banks was literally guessing. What is it now? Oh, maybe it's this now. And that led to an untidy stop-start and very frustrating game to watch. This could easily be a top 3 issue for the whole season. How many times has Villa been flummoxed by that same long diagonal ball to the back post area? And I think teams are preying on Villa, knowing that Emi Martinez is rooted to his line, because he is, love him, but he is, and that our fullbacks aren't necessarily physically robust and fancy some kind of aerial duel, because who was responsible for the wide open man at the back post? As much as the highlights for Andres Garcia show a very high potential attack-minded player who can score and set up teammates, I sure hope we are getting a defensive-minded player as well, because he's 6'1", very physical, and he has an engine on him. Maybe he might have read the danger on that 1-1 goal and snuffed it out at the source. And maybe, one day wouldn't it be nice if we could play that kind of long diagonal ball to the back post where the fullback sneaks in unmarked to nod home? And I do wonder how long before we're going to see Garcia in action. And the number one big issue that defined Villa 1, West Ham 1, Mings mangled. The expression on Monchi's face as he sat with Unai Emery in the stands while all this was unfolding on the field pretty much said it all. What was going through the mind of our president of football operations as Mings was being attended to by physios and then hobbled off the field and down the tunnel? Was he thinking, should we maybe have secured the services of another center back before selling Diego Carlos to a Turkish club? Or maybe he was thinking, perhaps I should have gauged the interest of Loic Badet in joining us a little bit more closely before entering into negotiations with his club, Sevilla. Or did the realization cross his mind that we're not exactly in the best bargaining position to land another center back before the window closes on Friday? And yes, we all know we're under PSR pressures because PSR was instituted to protect the big TV audience clubs. And yes, Christian Perslow and Johan Lange had a terrible record of throwing money around like confetti when it came to transfer fees and wages, and we're still paying for it. But something felt off to me about the approach after Pau Torres was injured, and presumably knowing that Diego Carlos was desiring to move on, or we wanted to move him on, whatever the reason may be, with so many fixtures stacking up in front of us. Once Tyrone Mings finally did pull the chute and hobbled off down the tunnel, then there was a decision to be made, and Lamar Bogard could have probably played there, but he's right-footed, and Unai Emery wants a left-footer on the left side. Boubacar Kamara played there for Marseille at times, but then we would have lost our very best player on the park and a critical central midfielder. So it ended up being Luca Dean, a left-footed, playing slightly out of position, and Ian Matson playing at left back. Not ideal, slightly awkward, but it completely somehow took the stuffing out of the game for us, while also offering West Ham this little glimmer of opportunity. Seeing Tyrone Mings return to the Villa dugout without help or crutches was a huge relief, and then he confirmed on his Instagram that it's not a serious knee injury, so that's big news, and whether he starts on Wednesday is another question, but at least it's a possibility. And then in the meantime, Villa chasing after 27-year-old Argentine international Juan Foyth, who plays at Unai Emery's old Villarreal, a player he's familiar with, who seems to fit the profile, 27, right-footed center back, and a reasonable price point, which is all we can kind of expect right now as more of an Ezri Konsa backup. The Sill Hill Brewery star performer was obviously Boubacar Kamara again, even though Yuri Tielemans had a fantastic start to this game and generally a really good performance. I just worry about how much Bouba will have left in the tank for the rest of this week. And speaking of tanks filled with deliciously handcrafted Birmingham brewed beer, the tap room hosted another match day meet after the game as Kevin Gage regaled the patrons with stories and insights during his time at Villa. Good crowd on hand, including Alan Crampton, my pal, and the Menzies brothers, with plenty of Blonde Star ale consumed. That's what I'm toasting Boubacar Kamara with for his dominant display. And the tap room will be open for the Celtic match, 4 o'clock that afternoon. And let's hope there's a lot of celebratory suds just overflowing afterwards. I keep saying how dropped points at Villa Park put the pressure on us to win away from home now and again, and Wolves away is always a horror fixture somehow. We did score first in this game, and Ollie Watkins' assist on Jacob Ramsey's first goal of the season meant 100 Premier League goal contributions in his 200 appearances for the club. That's incredible. Everything else here really just is window dressing, but trends that we worried about in November are still an issue as we approach the final week of January. And now, Celtic on Wednesday for a monumental game that could determine whether Aston Villa get a couple of days off to heal in the weeks ahead. And conveniently, the boys' Scottish Premier League game over the weekend was postponed due to weather, so they'll now have a full week to try to be fresh for the game, and they're right in the playoff round mix. They didn't look so convincing at home to young boys already eliminated. In fact, it took a very late own goal for them to win that game. But they also lost rather influential Daisen Maeda to a red card moments after, so he'll be a big miss for them. The Champions League standings heading into the final match day are so tight that finishing in the top 8 could literally come down to goal difference. Now, we're sitting at a decent +5, but wouldn't it be nice to have a comfortable showing and maybe bag 1, 2, or even 3 goals? That would certainly help a lot. Because we don't want to play in that playoff round. We don't need more games. We need guys like Onana and Barkley and, of course, Torres and others to get healthy, as well as keeping our current roster a little fresher. And maybe it gives us time to bed in others that we pick up during this window, like a new center back, for instance. And wouldn't it just be Villa's luck that we don't finish in that top 8 and get a bye to the last 16, and then end up playing a team like Manchester City or Paris Saint-Germain, which is absolutely possible, by the way. By the way, look out for my good friend Richard Davies from Midland Honda, the sponsor of my first trip over. He'll be in the house on Wednesday, and let's hope he's a good luck charm. Generally, it's not like me to feel so negative about a couple of performances within a week. And when you look at the table, I mean, we're still within touching distance in the Premier League and the Champions League. It's just that I've seen this movie before. We are fatigued, running on fumes, and our squad is on the thinish side. And other teams are suffering from injuries too. In fact, a lot of them. Ask Tottenham. Bournemouth has a lot, but they're coping because they're not dealing with the extra European games. Same can be said for Forest and Newcastle right now. Until Wednesday and Celtic, breathe some fresh air. And of course, up the mighty Villa.